Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 21 and the first story from chapter 21 on the Road to Latin textbook called Publius et Servius. So in this chapter you're going to basically continue what we were doing last chapter in terms of the grammar and kind of finish the idea of future tense. So there'll be a lot of repetition on things that are going to happen, these future tense verbs. That's really what it's all about. So it's going to connect back to the previous chapter, if that makes sense. Now, if you want to get more resources on this chapter or the story, the translation, anything, feel free to check out my website. If you go to Nova Latin, you can find my textbook. You can find the story, different tools for you, the cases highlighted, English translations, things like that. You can find grammar notes, explanations, videos, whatever it is you need to really understand this chapter and what's in it. You can find it all there. So I'd encourage you to take a look if you're having any trouble at all, if you just want to see the story in a different way or get some help on it. Now, before we dive in with this story, what I always tell you with all these stories is the first thing you have to do is really make sure that you have the vocab and grammar under control when you start a new chapter. So the vocab is really critical. Without that, you're going to have a really tough time reading it, right? If you don't know what the words mean, it doesn't really matter how much grammar you have or how much practice you've done, you're not going to know what's going on. So start with the vocab. And again, my textbook will help with that. I have all the words laid out, some derivatives. There's a Quizlet on there, right? A couple different ones that'll help you if you're looking for practice. So do what you have to do to make sure that you feel really good with the vocab. That'll be your first step to set yourself up for success. The next thing you want to do is really look at the grammar and make sure you've got a good sense of what's going on. So to help you with that, there's a couple things, and these are linked on my website too. You can find all my notes there if that helps you. You can also watch my YouTube videos. I've made videos, like I mentioned in the chapter 20 video, I've made videos on future tense, right? So 20 in the Road to Latin textbook, chapter 20 and 21 are the idea of future tense just split into two pieces. So these videos you might have already watched in the previous chapter. Go back and watch the second half of them because it's going to explain what we're doing in this chapter as well. So if you're looking for, there's one on active voice, one on passive. If you're just looking for an explanation of what's going on, I'd highly encourage you to go check out these videos, check out the textbook, do what you got to do. But that's where we're going to start here, right? So we're going to start with a quick overview of the grammar, just to make sure that we're feeling good. Because again, it's tricky if you don't know what's going on or at least haven't read through and seen the grammar. You're not going to be entirely sure how to translate this story. Okay, so the grammar picks up on future tense. So you want to remember, we talked about this in the last video. The word tense comes from tempus, which means time in Latin. So the tense of a verb is just the timing of when the action happened. That's all. The future tense, as you can already figure out, it's actions that haven't happened yet, but they're going to happen. That's why we call it future tense, right? They will happen in the future. And we usually translate it as will in English, right? I will do this or you will do that. So the trick with future tense, though, is that there's two different processes depending on what you're doing and what type of verb you have. So if you have a first or second conjugation verb, meaning the infinitive ends in an ARE, which would be first, or a long ERE, which would be second, you follow the process that we did in chapter 20. You go to the infinitive, you drop the RE, you add the infix of bo, be, boo, and then you add your endings depending on if it's active voice or passive voice. Now, in this chapter, you're seeing the second half. So we didn't talk about this in chapter 20, but in 21, you're going to see what do we do with third and fourth conjugation verbs? And it's something different, right? So you still go to the infinitive and drop the RE, right? That's your starting point, that present stem. But instead of bo, be, boo, you're really making sure that that final vowel, right? So if you drop the RE off the infinitive, you're going to either have an A sitting there if it's a you're going to have an E sitting there if it's a third conjugation verb, or an I if it's a fourth conjugation verb, right? So that final vowel, you need to flip around a little bit. You want to make sure that it's either an A for first person singular or an E for all the rest of them. So sometimes we say the A and 5 E's. Just make sure that that's on the end of your stem. And then you add your endings of ST, must, sunt. Right? And this should be, MST, must, sunt. So you just add on the ending for whatever you're trying to say. So if it's I, you're going to add an M. If it's you, you're going to add an S and down the line. And if it's passive, you just add the passive endings of R, R-I-S-T-U-R, M-U-R, M-I-N-I, N-T-U-R. So this makes it stand out because you're not expecting, with third or fourth conjugation, you're not expecting an A to be there, right? So that's kind of the giveaway that something's a little weird. You're like, why is there an A? Oh, it's future tense. You're also not necessarily expecting an E to be there because in present tense, we would flip that E to an I. So not to get too bogged down into the grammar and the conjugating, tricks and tips, but that's what's happening here. It looks different because you're so used to seeing an I there. And now when you have an E, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? That's future tense, right? It's as simple as the vowel flip. So I would say third and fourth conjugation tend to be a little trickier because it's a little harder to spot. But this chart is showing you all the conjugations at once and what's going on. So for active voice, you can see first and second conjugation, it's just bo, be, be, boo, and you add your endings. Remember, in first person singular, you don't add anything because it already has an O there, bo, right? I will do something. But now for third and fourth, you can see the A and 5 E's on it. So you have me Tom with an A, me Tace with an E, me Tet with an E, right? The A is kind of a wild card. You're not expecting it to be there at all. But the E with me Tace, me Tet, and down the line, that's usually an I. So the fact that it's an E is the difference to say, oh, wait a minute, this is future tense, right? And the more you practice this, the better off you're going to be. You can see the same thing for fourth. For third I and fourth, it's the same exact idea, but there's an I in front of the A and 5 E's. That's all. Okay, but otherwise that A and the E gives it away. If it's passive voice, they look exactly the same, just with passive endings, right? So bo, beris, bit, or down the line. For first and second conjugation. And for third and fourth, it's R, aris, ator. So again, the process is the same. You're just changing the ending to make it active and passive. And the translation changes as well. Active voice, you're saying, I will do something. Passive, you're saying, I will be somethinged, right? So it does change your translation. So for instance, if you said audiar, it doesn't mean I will hear. It means I will be heard, passive, right? So this is just a quick overview. All this stuff comes from my textbook. You can see the notes in a lot more detail there. So hopefully this is, you've already looked at the textbook and this is a refresher. But if this is the first time you're seeing it, I would suggest that you pause the video here, go back and read it in the textbook, do some practice, and then come back to the video. You don't want this to be the only time you've heard about how to, do future tense and third and fourth conjugation. That would be a little tricky, but it's enough to at least tell you what you're going to see in this story. So once you have this and you feel like you're in a pretty good place, the next part is to actually translate and read through the story. Now for this, I suggest that you read this aloud. So find someone in class, a partner if you can, read the story to them so you can practice your speaking, your pronunciation, and then have them read the story back to you. That way you can practice your listening skills. Like I always tell you, you never want to shut off those two skills of speaking, listening, reading, right? If you're just looking at the text and translating it, you're not really activating all the parts of your brain. And in particular, the ones that are really important for language learning, you got to listen to it. You got to speak. That's why I'd always suggest that you read these aloud and have someone read it to you if you can. Once you've done that, you're feeling ready to go. You'll be in a good place to translate this story. So let's just go over it right now to make sure that you're on the right track. So the story starts like this. You have, and remember, you're talking about the different family members in the garden, right? We kind of picked up on this in chapter 20. Now we're in chapter 21, and they're still hanging out. The family members are just talking, but we're talking about the younger children, Publius and Servius, which is the name of this chapter. So it starts, and you have Publius et Servius in horto ludan. So Publius and Servius, they are playing in the garden, right? Ludan is just present tense. In horto is telling you where they are. They're in the garden. No big deal. Then you have prope pueros parvos, Tulia cum amica Camilla sedet. So near, prope means near to, or near the pueros parvos, the small boys, right? Remember, it's accusative because prope takes an accusative in this prepositional phrase. So near the small boys, Tulia is sitting, sedet, present tense. She sits with her friend Camilla, right? Cum amica Camilla. That's ablative because she's with her. Right? Then you have feminae pueros spectant et audiunt. So the women spectant, they look at the boys, the pueros, or they watch the boys, and they audiunt, they listen to the boys. So they're watching and listening to the boys. So they're just watching Publius and Servius play. Then you have a quote. You have non semper inquit Publius, parvi eremus. So non semper means not always, right? Publius inquit, he says, present tense. Eremus is the future tense verb here. That's the future tense form of the verb to be, esse. The mus is telling you that it's active voice, and it means we will be, right? Non semper means not always. So he's saying we will not always be parvi, small, right? The reason parvi is ending in an I here, it's nominative plural. The reason it's masculine is because he's talking about two boys, right? Him and his friend, right? So, or his brother rather. So Publius and Servius, they're both boys. That's why you have the masculine ending. Then he continues and says, tum nos quoque cum Lucio et aulo Romam ambulabimus. So now he's referencing what happened in the last chapter when the older brothers, Lucius and Aulus, were going off to Rome. So he says, then, meaning when we aren't small anymore, then we, nos, there's your subject, we too, quoque, right? We also, or we too, ambulabimus. So here we have future tense. This is just a first conjugation verb, so you can recognize the bi gives it away as being future. We will walk, cum Lucio et aulo, with Lucius and Aulus, Romam, to Rome, right? Remember, when you have the name of a city, you don't need a preposition. Romam is accusative. It means to Rome. So he's saying when we get older, then we can go to Rome with our older brothers. Then you have mox discipuli eramus et quotidie ad ludam properabimus, respondet Servius. So soon we will be, eramus again is future tense, we will be discipuli, we will be students, like school students is what he means, like we'll be going off to school. And quotidie, every day, properabimus, we will hasten, right? Again, it's a first conjugation verb, properare, so the bi tells you it's future tense. The mus ending means it's active. So we will hasten ad ludum to school. So every day we'll go off to school, responds Servius, right? Servius responded. Then you have quid in ludo ages, rogat Publius. So Publius asks, what will we do? So ages here is our new type of future tense verb. This is ago agere, which is a third conjugation verb. The fact that there's an e in front of your ending is telling you it's future tense. So whenever you know your verb is third conjugation, meaning the infinitive is a short ERA. Whenever you know that, when you see an E in front of the ending, that's future tense. And again, the reason is because if it were present, there would be an I there. So the E gives it away as being future. So this is saying, what will we do in Ludo, right? In school, right? That's what Publius is asking. So, they're saying, oh yeah, Servius says, one day we're going to go off to school. Publius says, what are we going to do there? Right? Then you have the response. In ludo fabulas legam, respondet Servius. So Servius responds, he says, in school, in ludo, legam, here we go again. Legere is a third conjugation verb, means to read. The A in front of the ending means it's future tense. So he says, I will read, right? So Publius says, what will you do in school? Servius says, I will read fabulas. I will read stories, right? That's what he thinks he's going to do in school. Then you have the next part. It says, tune servi semper fabulas leges. So he turns to, Publius responds to Servius and says, you, Servius, right? The NE means he's asking a yes or no question, and he legitimately doesn't know if the answer is yes or no, right? He's not implying a yes answer or no answer. He's just genuinely asking. So he says, tu leges, will you read? Again, legere, third conjugation verb. The E in front of the ending means future tense. So will you read fabulas, stories? Semper means always. So he says, will you always read stories, Servius? So again, remember, Publius just said, what are you going to do in school? Servius says, I'm going to read stories. So Publius says, is that all you do, right? Are you always going to read, or will you always read stories? Then you have the response from Servius. He says, interdum ludi magister fabulas lege, right? Sometimes the magister ludi, the master of the school, right? The school teacher, leget, he will read. Again, same verb, legere. There's an E in front of the ending, future tense, right? Because it's third conjugation. He says he will read the stories. So, Publius says, are you going to always read the stories? He's like, no, sometimes the school teacher will, right? He's like, sometimes the teacher will read the stories and I'll just listen. Fabulas de deis et deabus leget, respondet Servius. So he says, he will read, leget, meaning the school teacher will read, fabulas, stories, about deis et deabus. These are both ablative, about gods and goddesses, responds Servius. So he's saying what will happen. He's like, no, sometimes the teacher will read and he'll read us stories about gods and goddesses, right? Mythology. Then you have Publius's response. He says, nos in ludo multas fabulas legemus rather, clamat Publius. So Publius shouts, he says, we, there's your subject, right? We will read legemus. This is future tense. You can tell because there's an E in front of that mus. It's third conjugation. The E means future tense. We will read multas fabulas, many stories in school, right? Shouts Publius. So he's all excited. He's like, yeah, we're going to read. This chapter is another good reason why I like, this paragraph rather, is another good reason why I like the Road to Latin textbook. It's giving you the same verb, legere, and showing you the different persons in future tense. So in other words, you have legam, I will read, leges, you will read, leget, he, she, it will read, and legemus, which means we will read, right? It's just going down the line, showing you the different forms of it. Now it keeps going, right? Tulia chimes in. Remember, the moms have been watching. So Tulia chimes in and says, quales fabulas mei fili legetis, rogat Tulia. So she asks, quales means what sort of? It's going with fabulas. So she says, you will read legetis. Here again, we had I, you, he, she, it, we will read. Now we get legetis, which means you all will read, right? Again, the E is giving it away as future tense. TIS just means you all. So she says, will you all read what sort of stories, right? So in other words, she's saying, what sort of stories are you going to read, mei filii, my sons, right? So she chimes in and she's like, what sort of stories are you going to read? Literally, you will read what sort of stories, my children. And then you get the response. You have fabulas de bellis et de aurigis legemus respondet Publius et Servius. So remember, the teacher is going to read stories about gods and goddesses. So Tullia's like, well, what are you guys going to read, right? And now we get the response, right? So you have Publius et Servius, that's our subject, respondent, they respond. And they say, legemus, we will read fabulas, stories, de bellis et de aurigis. We're going to read stories about wars, right? De bellis, warfare, wars, I guess you'd say, and about charioteers, right? This is what they want to read. Sure, why not? Then you have, again, the response from Tullia. She says, mei filii parvi Camilla, inquit Tullia, libenter fabulas leget, right? So my little sons, my little children, right? My little sons, Camilla. So here Tullia is talking to her friend Camilla. She says, my little sons will gladly, right? Libenter, happily, gladly read stories, right? Fabulas legent. There's your legent, the third person plural. They will read. So she's kind of turning to her friend and bragging, like, look at my little kids, right? They're gonna read all sorts of these stories. They're gonna be such smart kids. Is kind of what she's getting at. Then she says, fortasse domi fabulas narabunt. Okay. So fortasse means perhaps, right? So she's saying they're going to read all these things, and she says perhaps they will read, right, or they will tell fabula stories at my house, right? Or they will read them at my house, right? So she's like, domi at the house, they'll read these stories. So again, it's like this bragging. Again, narabon is future tense. You can tell by the BU, but it's the bragging by Tullia to her friend. Like, imagine this: they're going to read all these things at school, and maybe they'll read stories at home, right? They'll come home and read these great stories to us. Sure. Then she continues. You have parvi filii tui sunt cari Tullia. Okay, so this is the response from Camilla, right? So she just said, hey, Camilla, look at how smart my kids are. Now, Camilla responds and says, your little boys, right? Parvi filii tui, your small boys, sunt cari, they are dear, right? They're so sweet is kind of what she's getting at. Your small sons are dear, Tullia, right? There's your vocative. She's talking to Tullia. And she says, fortasse ad villam meam mox venient. So perhaps they will come, venient. Again, here's a fourth conjugation verb, venire. There's an E in front of the NT. It's future tense, right? Venient, they will come soon ad villam meum, to my house, right? So the friend is like, yeah, maybe they'll come soon to my house, right? Meaning they'll come and kind of read and stuff at my villa. Then you have nunc domum properabo, right? Now, though, properabo, I will hasten, right? Future tense, the bow gives it away. Properare is just first conjugation. I will hasten home. Okay, so she's like, maybe they'll come to my house one day, but now I'm going to go home, right? Time for me to leave. And she says, none ad lecticam pueri venietis, rogat Camilla. So surely, boys, right? She's talking to the boys. Venietis, you will come. Again, future tense, venire, fourth conjugation. The E in front of the TIS gives it away. You will come ad lecticam. You'll come to the litter, right? That she's going to go home in. So she's like, come on, guys, it's time to go. But boys, are you going to come to my litter, right? Surely you'll come. She's expecting them to say yes. None means you're expecting a yes answer, right? Then you have the response. You have veniema si Tullia quoque veniet respondent pueri, right? So the boys say, we will come. Again, veniemus, future tense. We will come if Tullia also will come, right? Quoque veniet. Again, both of these verbs are future tense. It's the verb venire, and you have the E in front of both those endings. The MUS and the T makes it future. So they're saying, yeah, sure, we'll come if Tullia also will come, respond the boys. Then you have cum filiis parvis inquit Tullia, libenter veniam. And Tullia says, I will gladly come, right? Veniam is future tense. You can tell by the A in front of the M. I will gladly come with the small boys, right? With my small boys. Then she says, none iterum cara Camilla, ad villam venies. There we go. So venies is future tense. Again, the E in front of the S. So she's saying, surely you will come again, right? Iterum means again. Venies is you will come ad villam, to the house. So she's like, surely you're going to come to the house again, cara Camilla, dear Camilla. It's vocative, right? So the friend is leaving. They're all going to escort her out. And she's like, you're going to come again, right? Then you have the answer. It's mox veniam et filiae mei quoque venient responded Camilla. So she says, I will come soon, right, folks? And my daughters, filii mei, my daughters also will come when he ends, responds Camilla. So on her way out the door, she's like, yeah, I'll definitely come and I'll bring my daughters next time, is the idea. Okay? So this story is just a lot of repetition on future tense, things that will happen. They're hanging out in the garden. The kids are talking about what they will do in school. The two friends, Camilla and Tulia, they're hanging out, bragging about, well, one is bragging about her children. The other one's like, Shirley, you're going to come to my house and tell me all these stories, right? Because the boys are so smart. It's just watching little boys playing in a garden. That's all. But the key is the repetition of future tense. I will come. You will tell stories. We will tell stories, right? We will read. It's all repetition on future tense verbs. And towards the second half of the story, you were really getting third and fourth conjugation verbs. A lot of repetition there. When you had the verb venire, right, to come, you saw that a lot. You had verbs like legere, right, to read. You got a lot of repetition on that. It's just to show you these different types of verbs. Third and fourth conjugation is really what this chapter is about. So it was trying to give you a lot of exposure to that. So hopefully it made some sense. The story you were able to follow and do pretty well with. Hopefully the grammar made some sense too. But if you have any questions at all, anything you're confused on, just put them in the comments below. I'm always happy to help you. But otherwise, keep reading the story. Again, I'd encourage you to do the read and reread method. So read through it, write down any sentences or parts you're not sure of, any words, any grammar, whatever it is. Once you're done with that first read, look up where you went wrong, write your list and be like, man, what does this word mean? Or what's happening with this verb? Oh, it's future tense. Got it. You review a little bit, then go back and read the story again. And on that second read, it should make a lot more sense. And if you have to do it a third, fourth time, whatever, keep reading it until you can do this without needing to live in your dictionary or to keep having to go back and look at your grammar notes. Once you're able to do that, you know that you've got this story down and you're in a really good place. Good luck with it.